Okay, good evening everyone and welcome to this meeting of the London Borough of Newham's Education, Children and Young People Scrutiny Commission. Can everyone hear me? I can't see them suddenly. There we go. Yes, there's a thumbs up. Thank you very much. This evening's meeting is being held at Newham Town Hall, East Ham. Members unable to join us physically at this location are able to join remotely. However, they will not be able to vote and their attendance won't be officially recorded, although their virtual attendance will be noted in the minutes. I would like to welcome the members of the public and press who are physically attending, although that's nobody, or watching on YouTube. With regards to the meeting etiquette, members of council, please can I ask that you indicate that you wish to speak by raising your physical hand or by using the hands up symbol on the Zoom dashboard. If you have put your hands up symbol on the Zoom dashboard for a while and I haven't called you, please feel free to just say something and shout out to the chair. That's absolutely fine, and I apologise, I may not always be looking up. Please could everyone observe sensible etiquette to help reduce the spread of COVID. For this session, we'll be supported for the first time by Fola, who is taking minutes, and also by Roger, who is helping with the technical side of things. Could we quickly go around the room so that those online can that are watching online can hear who we are? We're actually in a room where you can't see everyone, so there will be people in the room that you can't see. We'll go around and make sure that everyone's introduced themselves so that you know who is here. I'm Elizabeth and I am the chair. If you go this way around.
I'm Rachel Tripp, Councillor for Forest Gate North Ward.
I'm Sash, also Councillor for Forest Gate North Ward.
I'm Shannon Davis, Councillor for East Ham and Vice Chair for this commission.
I'm Madeline Starling-Thompson, Councillor for Forest Gate South and member of this committee.
Roger Raymond, Scrutiny Officer.
Vic Burnlow, Director of Education.
Alexander, Head of Education and Partnerships.
Hi, Tim Aldridge, Corporate Director, Children and Youth Services.
I'm Dara, Councillor about also
Lovely. Thank you.
Simon Rush, Pastor West Ham Journalist Councillor.
Thank you.
Follow in Scrutiny Officer.
Thank you very much. And then if we go for people online, Ellen, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Ellen Kemp. I'm a governor at a school in Newham. I'm co-opted member of this scrutiny commission representing the Church of England.
Thank you very much, Ellen. And Paul?
I'm Paul Underwood, Head Teacher at St Edward's, co-opted member representing the Catholic schools in Newham.
Thank you very much, Paul. Beverly?
Beverly Golding, newly appointed Deputy Team Leader in the Attendance Targeted Support Service.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Suzanne Morgan, new Team Leader in the Attendance Targeted Support Service.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So this meeting of the London Borough of Newham Education, Children and Young People's Scrutiny Commission is now called to order. So let's first of all start off with apologies for absence. I've had, well, Paula, have you had any apologies through? Apologies for absence.
Yes, we've had Councillor.
So the one I have down here is Councillor Thelma O'Day.
Oh, yeah, that's the one.
That's it. Okay, lovely. Does anyone else have any other? Yes, thank you. Who is currently in another meeting, so he has a clash. Otherwise, would have been here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think Councillor Sarah is.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. There aren't any specific large items related to her area, so absolutely fine. However, there are some things within the tracker that would relate to her, so she said that you'd be able to answer those if that's okay. Lovely. If there are no other apologies, and welcome, Ken. Please feel free to take a seat. If you sit there, you're going to be on screen. If you sit here, you won't. The apologies for absence will be noted. Thank you very much. Item 2, declaration of interest. This is for members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests that they may have in any matter being considered at this meeting. Please can I ask if there are any declarations of interest for this meeting?
Hi, I have been at the last agenda item and that's.
Okay, thank you. Could we note that down, please? Lovely. There are no other declarations of interest. Then we'll go on to item 3, which is the minutes. The minutes held on the 26th of January. Are there any corrections or accuracies to these minutes to be made? No, in which case I move that the minutes of the meeting of the commission held on the 26th of January 2023 be agreed as a correct record. Do I have a seconder, please? Yes. Thank you very much. Are the minutes agreed?
Yes.
Yes, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to go on to item 4, which is the forward work programme and recommendations tracker. The purpose of this item is for the committee to consider the tracker of previously agreed actions, information requests and recommendations of the committee, and to review the committee's work programme. Now, I would suggest that as we are now in our last meeting of the municipal year, that we don't need to look at the forward work programme because this is the last meeting that we have down. So are you okay for me to just read that and move on? In which case, then we will go just to the recommendations tracker. And I think we have some officers here that will be helping us with some of those. The first item on the tracker talks about the social worker visits that we undertook and the report that was created from that. I did ask whether there would be an update on whether any of the recommendations had been actioned. And I know that Sarah unfortunately isn't here, so you may need to take it back, but do you have any update on whether the recommendations have been, any of them have been implemented?
Yeah, on that item, Chair, I'm afraid I will get that. That's the rules.
Thank you very much. So, Paula, if we could just put that as an additional, because at the moment it is green as complete, but there was just one element that we needed to pick up on that, so that's fine. The item that was on the 30th of April 2022, that as part of additional engagement, the Children and Young People's Plan be brought to a school governors forum for input and information. Page 26. This says, yeah, it's on page 26. This says that it is in progress. However, it has been coloured green. So is it in progress or has it been completed? So could we put that into being orange rather than a green, please? Do you have an update on it?
Just to say that there's going to be some further work looking at the Children and People's Plan with the partnership to ensure that we the plan itself, the headlines of the plan, but also the details in terms of applicants and priorities are fully signed up on partnership. And the aim is then to bring that plan back to the Health and Wellbeing Board in the autumn.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. So perhaps if we put it down as a in progress, but we give it a good little while before we actually accept anything back. So possibly 6 months or so.
Yeah, I think you need to.
Yeah, no problem. From the 14th of July, the site visits to the Care Leavers Hub be arranged for members of the commission to attend. This says that it would be done after the social worker visit. However, the social worker visit was quite a long time ago. So do we have any updates on the visit to the Care Leavers Hub to the post?
So I don't know whether there's just been a gap in communication, but we are very happy to arrange that for members of the commission.
Could I ask so that it doesn't have to go back to follow and then to you and then back? Could you just send us some dates that we could go? Just send follow some dates that we could go, and then it will just happen rather than us keep going back and forth. So that would be lovely. So another one that we have as a update is that the commission received an update in 6 months' time, so that would be coming to this one. On services working to improve outcomes for those in transition between children's social care and adult social care.
So, Chair, the transition board meets on a monthly basis. There's a work plan which is being delivered and reviewed. It includes focus on areas including workforce development, systems including direct payments, performance, SEND, children needing care, and learning from other local authorities. And we can provide a short update report if the chair is not useful.
So I think as much as anything else, just so that we have something that we could put onto our records to say that this is, even if it's just a paragraph that explains that, I think that that would be a useful thing. Does anyone want more of an update than that? Yes.
Here is saying a short update meant to be March 2022, if I'm wrong.
It does say that.
Yeah,
I
but still,
think
it's within a year, we haven't received the full update.
No, I think that that's actually a mistake, and it's meant to be 2023.
We stayed since all the way through. You will count.
Because even though I haven't seen an update on the.
Yes, but the meeting happened in September 22, so the update can't have been in March 22. So the update must be March 23, because otherwise it would have been back in time. Yeah, but a good catch. There is a mistake there, and it should have been 23. Yes, but the reason that it would have said March is because this meeting was in the middle of the year. So the update was requested for the meeting that should have been in March. However, it was cancelled and it is now. But that's entirely fine. The next one here is the 23rd of November, that the service provide information on the numbers of children accessing service provision by Brighter Futures and whether there have been significant changes. That did come to the last meeting, and it was given in percentages. We have now got an update that has numbers in it, and I just like wish that I hadn't just potentially put my paper somewhere. So just to say that 2 of the percentages numbers are incorrect. Oh, I had it just beforehand. I'm sorry, I have it now. Got it. I have too many pieces of paper in front of me. Remember where one, I could say so thank you for giving us actual numbers rather than just the percentages. We appreciate that. Just to let you know that 0.2. You've said it's a 10% increase, but the numbers that you've given is a 20.5% increase. So that's better for you, but it is inaccurate. And also the last point as well, you said it's a 16% increase, but the numbers that you've given is a 24% increase. So the others, the percentages are right. I could only tell those ones because they was low enough for me to know what the percentage should be. Whereas the larger numbers, I did then check them, and those percentages are correct. But just for those 2, that's not. I wanted to just get a clarification around 0.3, if that's okay, in terms of what is meant by completion rate. I'm assuming that the completion rate, for example, for quarter 3, if you have it in front of you, whoever's going to answer this question.
We're still on page 27.
31, this is of the, so this is the additional, this is an additional paper actually, so this, you may not have this additional paper. This, yeah, you've got it. Get Shanti off there.
This is saying on page number 28, last paragraph. The head of camp said that he could share the equipment capital identified back and post, and when they were filled, which include a secretary. So could you know how?
Sorry, we're going to go back. We're going to go back to that. We're on one at the moment, but we are going to go back to the track number. So do you have it in front of you now?
I'm just looking for it. But did you send that to me more recently? I know it's come from service.
Yeah. No, there's this.
That was sent.
Yeah, it was from the service. From the service. Well, do you know what? Let's not spend a huge amount of time on it. Maybe I will ask my question through Paula and then get a response. Is that okay?
Can I ask a question for page 31?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, the second point in the bullet point, there was a 10% increase in the early enough support caseload, which demonstrates pressures with demand, increased from 39 cases that started in the quarter to an increase of 8. What I wanted to know was whether that was an increase of self-referrals, or was that an increase of agency referrals, schools, etc., doctors, or was it a case that you could actually cope with that many?
Okay, I don't have the answer for you on that, but I'll have to say that. So it's not.
I think what I might suggest, if that's okay, Matt, is if you could, because this is meant to be just a slight tick boxy thing, if you could say to follow that, if you could write that question, send it to her so that she can give that directly, if that's okay. A tiny bit more clarity around 1, 2, 3, around point 4 would also be useful, because it says 8% increase in the number of unique users of accessing the service, the youth offer, and the same increase for the number of attendances across the whole youth offer. That's not saying that, it's saying two things. It's saying an increase of unique users and an increase of numbers of attendances, but which one does the numerical number refer to would be my question on that as well. But we'll send all of those directly to you. But thank you for giving us the numbers, because that's something that we asked for, and that has come through, so that is helpful. Thank you. And we are now on page 28 now, Shanti. So what was your, which number was it that was your question?
I'd like to know how many people, how many psychopaths they recruited.
So could you just, before you ask the actual question, which one of these?
The head of care said he could share the recruitment tracker to identify back and post. And
So it's the very
when they are filled, which includes psychiatry, but we don't know how many so far they have done. So do you have that? Do you have that figure so we can know how many people they recruited so far?
So we're actively following up that request. We haven't yet received that information from the head of CAMS, but we will continue to follow up. If there's a follow-up question in terms of greater detail, we can suggest that.
I think it sounds like we're just wanting the actual answer to the question that has been requested.
Yeah, it's quite vague, it's not clear.
So that's fine. So once you've got the information for that, then there isn't an update in this, and it is an in progress point. So that's absolutely fine.
Can I quickly add to that point?
Yeah.
I would like to know how much needs is actually being met at present and how much needs is not being met.
Are you specifically talking about the child and adolescent mental health and wellbeing provision? Okay, so Paula, is that okay if we just put down an addition to this point here, which is that we would also like to know how much need is being met and how much need is not being met?
Yeah.
And how you would measure that. Does that make sense to you as a question? Because you're
in relation to vacant roles, is that?
No, it's in.
Yeah, where we have that.
What's concerning me throughout this is that whilst understandably the actions are very heavily targeted on meeting the recruitment needs, my interest, particularly as a parent and a practitioner, is what's happening at the coalface in the meantime.
okay, so I think actually in which case, Mads, I think that last session we had a very, very long and prolonged session on mental health support and what was being done. So this was a request that came out of that, but we have actually heard a lot in the last one, which I know that you were unable through medical things to be at. So perhaps it might be a good thing if we look back at the minutes from the last one, or you could watch it back with YouTube as well, and then if there's anything that's still you think hasn't been addressed.
I might be able to pick it up through a mental health advocacy, as that's a lot that I've been asked to do. Council.
Yeah.
So so from my understanding, what the man asking on the last meeting I was here, that said we didn't meet a list of children. There's still many children are on waiting list.
So, but just to say that, yeah, absolutely. But this is specifically actions that came out of the meeting. This isn't a substantive kind of point that we're wanting to go down. These are just the actions that came out that we're wanting to look at the moment.
Do you mind if I ask one more point?
I think actually, just if it's okay, we're going to go on to, because this bit shouldn't take that long. We want to use most of our time to go through the two substantive parts of this that we'd like to look at. We do have two more bits here that I think that we are wanting an update on. So 23rd of November, that the Commission received an update on Newham becoming a child-friendly borough. I believe that you have just had something happen to do that, or you've just had a visit. Is that correct? I think there was meant to be a visit, though, in the minutes when I looked at them, there was meant to be a visit happening in March.
A visit from the City
Yeah.
Council, that's correct, yeah. So yes, that visit did take place. And there's further follow-up work to take place in terms of pursuing what the options are in terms of establishing Newham as a child-friendly borough. And that work progresses. And again, I would suggest we'd be in a position to provide an update to the Commission if that's helpful by you.
Okay, and when you say update, is that likely to be an update with tangible sort of, yes, we're going to go ahead, or no, we're not going to go ahead, or this is what it's going to look like?
It should provide the full plan at that stage.
Okay, so full plan in April. Oh, no, sorry, autumn. I have no idea why I said April. They do both of them, that's one probably the reasons.
I know I may not be able to have the answer to this now, but when will we be receiving an update with regards to permanent exclusion work that the borough is undertaking with academies? Because this is something that has been of deep concern to many of us for over a year.
Was that on one of these specific ones, or are you talking about the children missing in education?
This one.
Yeah. Do we have an update on that?
So tonight, in the paper, there will be, I know there are two actions, one on attendance, one on exclusions. Tonight, the paper is going to touch upon both of those areas. We do recognise you might want further information following that. There's some detailed analysis and work going on in terms of that exclusions piece, which will also incorporate suspensions and attendance as well. We will have that report ready for later in the summer term. So again, Chair, if it's helpful to bring something in further detail in I would thought June or July, we can do that.
Okay.
But we will touch upon it tonight.
Yeah. So and just to say, in terms of the members of the Commission, can we not please jump in, because I'm going through them all in order, and so it's a little bit disorientating for me to be skipping to different ones. So yes, we would now like to go on to the 26th of January, which where we do have an update from you, and I think that particularly from what Mads has requested as well, we would like a further and more in-depth one around the service provision that you will be touching on today, but not going into lots of detail. Is that okay? And who will be giving us the report on the absences?
Will be
Would you like to do that now then? Is it part of our, would you like to do that now? Is it part of our action tracker?
So we've got the report on the outcomes, so we put that now, or in the actual, the same report.
So in terms of on the agenda, it was the there's attainment.
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry.
It was absences that I was requesting.
Yeah, that's sorry, I'm getting confused.
That's okay.
Two points.
No, don't worry, I did the same thing. I messaged everyone and said attainment when I meant absences. It can easily be done.
Not at all. We've got Suzanne Morgan on screen, and I'm going to just put a few slides up on the screen last to that specific topics.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. And this is in relation to the question that we asked for some more detail and an update on attendance.
Thank you. Sorry, is Vic putting the slides up for us?
Just in the process of doing it.
Thank you. So That's okay. So I'm new to Newham. I've only been here for 4 weeks. So I've invited my colleague Beverly along, who's been here a lot longer and works on the coalface with the schools and young people and local authority. So she might be able to answer some questions with me, although I'm not new to attendance, as it were. So hopefully I can do some service once the slides are up.
Is it? Oh, hello and welcome. And I would say, well done for doing a report to us when you've only been here for 4 weeks. So
You're welcome.
thank you, Beverly, for joining her.
Thank you.
Technical issues are always the bugbear. I'll just mention that the last action that was on the action tracker was to do with the amount of money that Newham get from for mental health service provision, and just to say that we have written a letter and follow has that letter now been sent, and it's actually been sent as a joint letter from the education scrutiny and the health scrutiny as well, so it's been done as a joint one. We will let you know when we have updates on that. No, that's a letter from us to the North East London funded about how much we receive for our mental health support in comparison to other boroughs. Okay, we have it up on screen now, so thank you very much, Vivian and Beverly.
You're welcome. Vic, would you mind going to the second slide, please? Thank you. So attendance across the borough has been quite consistent with the national attendance since 2015-16 up to 2020-21. We have managed to be above mainly the national. So 95 is the national average, and we have been consistent until 21-22. We are still above the national, as you can see, at 93.8 in 21-22, but everybody had a dip, and there's a current dip across the country. Part of that still being due to COVID, and also the strep A and other ailments that were affecting young people and their families before Christmas. So between September, December and January, there has been a dip in attendance. We also, across the board, do have poor attendance generally between January and April due to the chickenpox outbreaks, the winter bugs and different medical conditions. I believe in Newham, one of the biggest problems, especially in primary schools, is still the volume of unauthorised leave in term time. And that's something that we, the local authority, are challenging and working with families and our schools. And that's further in the slides in the plan. So the national primary attendance is 93.7. and the national secondary is 90.8. So we're just under with the primaries, and we are just above with the secondaries. So our secondary schools are doing quite well and have been consistent. It's a piece of work that we have to do as a local authority with our schools. I have looked at the DFE data, and we are in line with our comparable neighbours. So I've looked at 8 other neighbours across the water and in East London, and we're actually comparable with those boroughs. Next slide, please, Vic. Thank you. Thank you. So this data shows from 21-22, and that's the last generated data that we've pulled from our census. And it shows that primary schools were ranked 76 in England for PA10. So PA10 is any child with 10% of their possible attendance as absence, whether it's authorised or unauthorised absence. And that can be due to illness, that can be due to exclusions, reduced timetables, leaving term time, other exceptional circumstances. In regards to PA 50, we was ranked 151st at that time for primary schools. And in secondary schools, Newham secondary schools were ranked 10th in England for PA 10 and 30th for PA 50. The PA 50 are our most vulnerable cohort, the young people who have got the worst attendance in each school. So they're the young people on our radar who we really need to do some work with, as well as holistically for the PA 10 children. Newham special schools are ranked 148th in England for PA 10 and 149th for PA 50. I believe this is because we only have 2 actual special schools, and these are for severely poorly young people. So their absences would be mainly related to medical absences. But my team and myself are doing a deep dive into these schools to look at their attendance behaviours, their attendance policies and reasons for absence, and what support we can do to work with the schools and the families to improve attendance. Next slide, please, Vic. Thank you.
Sorry, Suzanne, can I jump in about
Absolutely.
the special schools?
Yeah.
So what we've found again with some of the special schools, resource provision ones as well, is since COVID, the attendance has dropped even more than what it was before with their complex needs. So since COVID, things have got a bit worse with attendance in those schools.
Thank you, Beverly. So the action plan and moving forward, we have a fully operational team now. So we're fully staffed, which is wonderful. And we have 100 schools to visit this term. And that's something that we're aiming to do by carrying out the targeted attendance support meetings, termly visits. We're dividing them between the 3 managers, and all schools will be visited. We were looking at attendance policies, attendance behaviours, reasons for absence, and giving general guidance and advice for those schools who do not buy into the service, but the ones who do buy into the service with service level agreements will be fully supported around attendance work leading up to the parental measures if that's required, and the borough offers parental measures for schools who do not buy in. But what we're looking at is providing some consistency across all of our schools in relation to their practices, in relation to their parental measures, to making sure that everybody is working in the same fashion and getting the best outcomes for regular school attendance and young people. We're running a set of attendance forums where we will be inviting schools, attendance officers and attendance leads and other people who deal with attendance to come to these meetings. We will be looking at having other agency guest speakers, such as the health visitors, who can talk about what Public Health England is advising on for if we have any breakouts of, for example, the Strep A or the COVID. We will be talking about actions and following correct procedures for attendance. We've looked at, with our admissions team, the new guidance on children missing education, for the parental measures, which is the penalty notices, school attendance orders and any legal interventions, so that there's consistency and clear guidance, and that we will deliver training to our colleagues. And we've also got some exciting news. We're doing a promotion for the local authority. We're working with a partner to promote regular school attendance. We're doing a workshop with several families, one with 100% attendance, somebody on an attendance journey, and somebody whose family has been affected by poor attendance, and looking at a special educational needs family to promote the values of good school attendance and what what enrichment a young person can receive by attending school regularly. So this isn't just a film, it's about social media, it's about flyers, it's about getting that message into schools and working with schools, and actually working with the working together document, making sure that schools understand that every child who has an attendance concern has an individual action plan to support the improvement of that young person's attendance so that they get the best quality. And it's also about making sure our parents have a relationship with the schools, parents and carers have a relationship with the schools to work together to get the best outcomes for our young people.
And on top of that, every school will have an appointed officer as a point of call if they need to ask any questions.
Thank you, Beverly. Next slide, please, Vic. So the attendance service now has 3 offers. The bronze offer is the local offer that is given to all schools. It's a free termly visit, and as you can see from there, we'll be holding termly conversations with our schools using their attendance data, identifying the cohorts who are at risk of poor attendance. These are our vulnerable young people. When we say vulnerable, they're the ones who are at risk of exploitation, the risk of missing out. They have other exceptional circumstances. They are our child protection children, our children in need, and special educational needs cohorts as well. So we will be looking at the PA 50s in those schools. Regular school attendance forums provide access to early help support workers who will work intensively with schools. One of the biggest things as a local authority and local authorities nationally is the working together across each agency and building a team around the school support to help all schools geographically as well as individually work together to get the best outcomes and the best services to support those young people. And then if we need to, we will take forward with the legal interventions, the parental measures. That's what we will offer through the free offer. As you can see, the gold and silver packages, they're the same package, but the gold package is an officer in their school for 5 hours, not just in the school, but delivering a 5-hour-a-week service. And the silver package is a 2.5-hour week. We've got 42 schools who have renewed their contracts. Some of those schools have gone from what was the old bronze package to the silver package, and some from the silver package to the gold, so that the schools can see the quality of service that they're getting. Part of the local authority targeted support meetings will be to show schools our expertise in what we can do, how we can support, and what we will do if you actually bought into the service as well, so that they're getting continuous expertise. And as Beverly said, there is a point of contact. There's a duty line and a duty email address where schools can contact us regularly for information. Thank you, Vic.
Lovely, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Beverly, we appreciate your time. Did you want to add something to that, Vic? If you don't.
Oh, no.
Oh, go on, Beverly, did you want to?
No, I'm fine, thank you. No, sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
If not, then we can go straight to asking a few questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think just very briefly, we're also looking at the way the educational psychology team can support with emotion-based school avoidance, and that's a particular area of focus. So we will be looking at a toolkit, and I think you know, Suzanne and team, as they talked about a kind of attendance campaign, that'll be a really key part of promoting good attendance for all children as well. So.
Thank you very much. And follow, I think that we did actually ask it at the previous one, but you wasn't taking the minutes then, so it's not your fault that it didn't go in. But could we also request a visit with the Newham targeted support team, the team that we discussed? Because I think that now they're fully operational, but we were hoping to, once they'd had 6 to 12 months embedded for us to actually go and talk to them to see how it's improved attendance. So that would be really good. Who has questions on this? So I've already heard that Ken does, and then Shantu, and then Rachel, if that's okay. Ken.
Okay, I have 3 questions. I'll try to be as brief as possible to give you time to answer. First of all, forgive me, Suzanne, you said that when you provided some of the data, viable data on attendance records, you said on the top level percentages, you said we were compatible with similar boroughs that you looked at. I was just wondering on the PA10 and the PA50, where we are in comparison to the boroughs like us, because obviously they are national figures, and it's where, you know, some of the ones that are right at the top, I imagine, are quite deeply wealthy areas, but what are we doing in comparison to where we are boroughs comparable to us in London, or comparatively was nationally on a more socio-economic level? Whoever's got the answer.
We could go to Josh, and then you decide who you like.
I wanted, firstly, thanks for tolerating my lateness. I'll get my stitches out.
I think that if anyone had a good reason to be late for a meeting, having your stitches out is perfectly legitimate.
Thank you. I think to assist both myself and Arthur, Ken, what would be most, sorry, Councillor Ken, what would be most helpful if we looked at the data with comparison to multiple indices of deprivation for other inner London boroughs. Because geographically, and then of course you look at the whole country, it's a different set of data, but there will be some boroughs where there are the same indices of multiple deprivation. However, their geographic nature might make it more difficult for the average child to travel to school. And that's the thing. So while in inner London, you have the same multiple indices of deprivation that you would have, for example, in other areas of the country, it's free for a child to travel to school, and it's usually very close.
Right.
And that's a key difference. So we can give you both, but what exactly is the picture that you want to look at?
Yeah, and that's a fair point, because obviously if you're in a rural, or, you know, I'm originally from different, somewhere like Knowsley, which is spread out and more difficult. Yeah, I just want to have an indication of, you know, where on this level, where we're doing well and where we're doing badly compared to boroughs like those like comparable
area.
That's what I'm looking for, because that'll be a bit, you know, where we might find out we're doing fantastically well, in which case great, or we might find we might be lagging in some way. So lessons we can learn ourselves, or actually, if we are doing well, how can we help the other boroughs that aren't?
Lovely. So can I ask, do we already do that? So is that something that you can just go, yeah, here, this is the information? And if that's not the case, then can we request it?
That was going to a question to the bit whether we could have another type of inner London boroughs, first of all. That's probably quite easy to get hold of.
Yeah, it should be, we'll probably look at it. We have statistical neighbour authorities that will be comparable in demographics, so we could probably look at the data in that and look at that. So
we haven't got it already, but it should be fairly easy.
It's probably just a quick bit of data, so you know, flashing data together. What colleagues didn't share is there's a 6-weekly children missing education board, which I chair, and routinely we get the data coming through, so I can make that one of the threads. So thank you. That was my third question, so I'll try to have 2 more.
Do you want to do one more, and then we'll go to some other people, because we may not have enough time. This is just an update. It's lovely to have such an in-depth update. I really thank you for doing us up an in-depth update.
I mean, if you could time, come back to me, but I'll ask one question.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
Hi, there is no restriction, only 2 years COVID restrictions at school and Newham and for special school. And school was not closed for 1 day since last year, I think 2021 summer. So there is one reason they gave, we had that because of that reason, there is a lower absence, but I am not convinced because school was not closed for 1 day. So do you have any data from parents, have any records? What was the actual reason for the absence?
Okay, so specifically, how do we
Monitor.
well, and also how do we justify saying that COVID is a reason? So what is the element of COVID that is the reason for?
I think there's we have obviously the singular special school, and you know, it only has 140, approximately 140 children. So the statistics can be swayed somewhat by small numbers as well. So, you know, one child would be, you know, 7% roughly, I'm trying to do the math, but you know, of that data. So, and there's also legitimate reasons why young people might be off from a special school in terms of absence from medical appointments, etc. as well. So, as Suzanne said on the screen, it's a piece of work we will look at and work really closely with our colleagues in school.
Yeah,
but
we need the actual reason. Why exactly have they not just not blaming on COVID on these?
Can I just interject, please?
Yes.
Sorry, when we was talking about COVID, we wasn't talking about schools being closed to COVID due to the COVID restrictions. It's taken a long time for young people who have mental health and anxiety to come back in. So there are high numbers of young people still struggling to return to school post-COVID due to anxiety and mental health, not specifically just COVID. COVID was there in between September and December, as was Strep A, as reasons for absence. Previously, we was able to code COVID with an X code, which meant it didn't affect the overall attendance rate. COVID is now marked as I for illness, so it does impact on the overall attendance. And as Vic was just saying, if there's a low number on roll at a school, you only need a handful of children to make the persistent absence high in that school. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. I think that we're actually going to end that one there because I want to make sure that we get all of these questions by 8, because then we've got an hour and we've not yet got to our first substantive item. But I think that the main point there was that when it says COVID, it doesn't always mean sickness because of COVID.
Yeah.
It can mean a number of other things as well.
This is I meant with the record of the whole case.
Thank you very much, Susan. Rachel.
I just wondered what the take up of the trade support around attendance is looking like. It all looks to be promising, but obviously what we're hearing about the pressure on school budgets.
We'll have the figures. I don't have it to hand, so I can take that away.
Yeah, even just to give us a brief note, that'd be really interesting. Thank you.
Fabulous. Unless there's someone has a question, I think this is so important that I must do it because otherwise I'd like to go on to the next agenda item. I mean, it is so important. I think if it's okay, what I'll suggest is that any additional questions that we can put, we can put in writing.
Record, and then you give me the answer.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Rachel asked all the questions, so I've only got one.
But you don't need to answer this.
Okay, no, yeah, unless it's easier. But I just wanted to know in the data we've got available. Does it show between you've got maintained academies and independent schools? Are we seeing different trends between those in terms of absences, and also are they skewed? So, for instance, if our academies and independent schools are doing really well, then that might mean we've got a problem in our own schools or vice versa. I just want to know what's under the bonnet there, because the top line figures don't always tell the story.
Lovely. Feel free to take that away. Thank you very much. And for Simon, your question, and Ken, your third question. And if it's okay, if you could put it in writing to follow, and she'll pass that on. So that would be wonderful. Okay, in which case we will close the item that is looking at the tracker. And we will go on to the item 5, which is the educational outcomes in Newham. Oh, so thank you very much to Susan and Beverly. Please, if you're not contributing to these next items, feel free to go. And thank you very much for your input. We really appreciate it. Have a lovely evening.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.
Yeah, are we not on agenda item 4?
No, I think agenda item 4 was the one that we've just done. What did your agenda item 4 say?
Now.
Yeah,
That's what she said.
Well, on my script it says
And so it's because apology for the agenda item to you, but not on everyone else's agenda.
never mind. So agenda item, educational outcomes in Newham. Councillor Garfield, I think you'll be leading on this item with support from Tim Aldridge, Vic and Patrick. I apologise that some of you I said your last name, some of you I didn't. I'm sure that there'll be a blog somewhere that takes me off the right. Would you like to take, Josh, about 5 minutes to give us a bit of an overview, and then we'll open up to questions?
Certainly, Chair. Thank you. Firstly, it's come as no surprise that most of us here at Newham has some of the most excellent results at schools in the country, and that's the transformation that has taken place over the past 2 decades, due mostly in part to the leadership of many of the schools in the borough that have frankly been turned around. And we do have a number of schools that have maintained a level of excellence and a level of inclusion that we're really, really proud of. What these figures really highlight is we're now at a point, as reported for scrutiny, two quarters ago, where 97% of our schools are rated good or outstanding by Ofsted, but that is just, of course, one metric. Secondly, a vast majority of our pupils, more so than ever before, are achieving all of the milestones that they're expected to by central government at literacy and numeracy levels in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, and then they're achieving the transition required in their SATs in Year 6, and they're going on to achieve excellent GCSE results and brilliant BTEC and then A-level results, which of course we're not looking at in great depth here because this deals with just primary and secondary school. I imagine that most of the committee have poured through the data, but I would really like, because I know how much you're across the data, Patrick, to hand over so that he can take you all through kind of the key pieces in the data set that you might want to probe further on, all that we're indeed very proud of, and also areas to which we know there are issues to work with schools on improving further.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm going to suggest because Josh took 2 minutes and you can have 3, and that takes up the 5 for the presentation. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
and then we'll ask you lots of questions.
Okay. Well, I think in that case, we'll try and get through this fairly quickly. I've got a comprehensive summary. You'll be aware from the previous commission report in November, we updated that, the performance of the schools in Newham is extremely strong when compared nationally and with other comparable authorities. I won't dwell too much on that. We'll go into what you've requested, which is an update on our geography and ethnicity at 3 progress points. The paper reports our 10 overall, but in pursuit of improved performance and greater equity of a wider group of education partners at the Education Partnership Board and subsequent education conference agreed earlier this year in February to collaborate on a new education vision for 2030 to try and push forward the service improvements across the borough. And I can talk in more detail about that. Josh has already mentioned that, Ofsted's metrics is an extremely high performing borough, but as he also said, it doesn't take us too much into the detail. So on that, across the whole spectrum of progress points, early years, Key Stage 1 and 2, and Key Stage 4, there was no consistent pattern found across all wards. There were some disparities in performance, which we can talk about this. And what I've done in this paper is highlight where there was high comparative attainment in some wards at each point, early years, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 4. And I should probably highlight that at Key Stage 2, for example, many new primary schools have attained and England averages, which is a great achievement. Overall, the borough attainment was above London average and national average to the extent that the rank was 7th in England out of 152 local authorities. And again, you can see in the detail of the report which wards I highlighted in terms of the high comparative attainment. At Key Stage 4, again, overall borough attainment was above national and London averages up from 2019. And many of you secondary schools have attainment in progress, as you expect, well above London and England averages, we know from my last update in November. I will also ask the commission to note that several cohorts in 2022 had very strong attainment outcomes by ethnicity, particularly Bangladeshi, Indian, Pakistani, and any other Asian background. When I refer to ethnic groups, these are the DFE categories that are common to all data outputs. Black African and any other black background pupils were among the lower attaining cohorts at early years, but achieved above average attainment at Key Stage 4. White and Black African pupils also above average among the higher attaining cohorts at Key Stage 4. And there was some proportionality also among ethnic groups. Commission will note in the paper that attainment progress of the pupils with a mixed white and black heritage was lower at Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3. While British pupils have the lowest levels of attainment at Key Stage 4. So if I could go on share, I've detailed in the paper there are a range of measures that we're undertaking to improve equity in Newham. It may take longer than 3 minutes, so
Well, I know that we have a question specifically on that, so why don't we move to questions and then you can give us all of that in your answers to them if that is okay. Would I think possibly if we take them in 2 lots at first, just to make it clearer, so perhaps if we look at the geographical ones first, do we have any questions? Yes, Rachel.
Obviously, it's very interesting looking at the geographical breakdown, but I wondered if you had a sense of what that was really telling us. Is this a kind of proxy for deprivation, or is it showing how results vary between different schools? And is there anything that you think we should be doing as a result?
I think we know that attainment is supposed to be linked to deprivation. So to some extent, yes, proxy by geography, and I say that was more closely linked to primary school than secondary school. For the reason that primary school catchment areas will the distance travelled is within more into that primary school, so it's harder to track that in terms of at secondary school. So I will note that Royal Docks, for example, that there is comparatively high attainment, partly possibly because of the distance travelled by pupils in that ward to secondary school outside of that ward, for example. But yes, in broadly, I think I would agree with that characterisation that there is a proxy bit, but in questions like the family bed.
As a slight on from that, do you feel that breaking it down as smaller by ward is useful? As a statistical exercise, did you find that useful?
I welcome the question.
I don't think the question ever asked for it to be broke down by ward. No. It asked for a geographical breakdown, and I was surprised it was so granular. But I mean, it's interesting because we're all councillors and we like to see our own report, don't we?
If I could follow up, I think there is an ongoing conversation amongst officers about, and this is something that I've been looking at with a school improvement plans, how we think about outcomes by locality. And that's really not just about school attainment. I think that's across a whole range of outcomes. And I think we were talking about it in a meeting of the council today. It's a different method for analysis, it's a different framework, and actually it's not one that we undertake and use from a school improvement perspective very often. When I speak to my school improvement advisors, so just to explain, as we commission a team of consultants who we use to drive through school improvement across the borough. There is some will to look at how locality can be a way we look at school improvement. So to encourage capacity building and look at area where there are gaps. And so to that extent, it was useful, but I think ultimately, to the point that's already been raised, at a certain phase, it is possibly a proxy for something which doesn't illustrate things that we don't really know, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I'm pleased that it was useful, at any rate, particularly at the level you said. Yes, Josh.
Thank you, Chair. There is a tremendous amount of data available for the council that is broken down by these boards. These are the 2002 to 2022 boundaries. So one might describe them as currently out of date, but because I think of a legacy of how the council collects, records and distributes data, this was the most natural way for the data team that assisted to break it down, as is the case with data on crime and community safety that the council used and the Met used. The same with school deprivation. Most of it is still along these boundaries.
So I think sorry, one moment. I think that the thing that I was wondering was that whether, because we obviously have someone who has a expertise in statistics, whether when you receive a question that you also make a decision on what's the best way to present the answer. And so for example, with community safety, you're looking at populations of 17,000 in a ward. When you're looking at the statistics for different wards in terms of the schools, well, some wards might have 2 schools in and some might have 6. So there's a disproportionality there in terms of the sample size that you're looking at. And so whether a broader geographical area might have been statistically more useful was my only thinking around that. But even if it would have been, which possibly, it sounds as though you're saying it may have been. I'm pleased that it still had a good outcome internally in terms of actually having that slightly more granular look. Sasha, sorry, did you want to say something on that?
No, that was, you covered that perfectly.
Fabulous. Simon.
Thank you. I'm more thinking about 7.2. We're talking about low levels of attainment and stuff like that. It doesn't seem to be any gender breakdown.
So I think that we have to put our hands up, and thank you very much for bringing it up, Simon. In the meeting that we previously had, we did request a gender breakdown. However, I understand that the formal request that you received didn't have a request for a gender breakdown in it. So we did change our officers in that time. So there's no blame or fault attributed. But I absolutely agree with you, Simon, that it would have been really useful to have had a gender breakdown on this as well, particularly when we were looking at the ethnicity stats, that actually having a gender breakdown on that would have been really useful. And I think you're not the only member that's pointed that out as quite a glaring space that would have been useful. But I recognise that we didn't request it for me. Is that something that would be easy enough to do?
We can get that to the user, certainly. It's quite easy to pull the data that we have, which is not one that we have immediately if you work with representatives, but we can definitely send it to them.
Thank you very much. Yes, Shantu and then Max.
Hi, some of the children from different ethnicity doing quite good in Newham. But I would like to know, what is the reason Black African people are among the lower attaining cohort in early years? So can you know the reason? Is there any way we can find the reason and we can help, by finding the reason, we can see how we can help them and how we can improve those areas?
I don't think it's a simple answer, but it's obviously something that, given the disparities there, we've got an opportunity to look into it and report back. Our findings are, I suspect that there are a range of factors involved that probably go beyond the scope of pure education outcomes. But I don't want to speculate too far about a further opportunity to look into this and come back to you.
Please,
but
if you
also
can, be really great, so we know how we can help them, so if we are working together.
Indeed.
And we should point out that cohort actually improves as time goes on.
Yes, although I think there is something to be clear about that. I also initially drew that conclusion, and then of course realised that that's a stat that you can't touch on comparison, because you're actually looking at a snapshot of two different cohorts separated by a number of years. So it's a claim that I nearly made and then realised I couldn't make that claim. So, but yes, it's also pleasing to see that it indicates it could be a good progress outcome in the borough.
And do you ever see longitudinal?
I mean, we're sort of straying into the realms of a social study that we're not really we have the capacity to do, but certainly one that would have merit. And if that was in the scope of what we could deliver as officers, and I'd love to see what that report would say. But we can certainly look at what we are able to do with our existing resources, and I think longitudinal study would be beyond the realms of possibility, in the fullness of time that we have at the moment.
Lovely. Just because that was going off onto a little bit of a tangent, anyway, we'll go to another question. Yes.
It's actually following up kind of on both those points. First thing being, we've known for decades that the two groups that are coming bottom of these attainment tables have been coming the bottom of attainment tables for decades. We've known this since the 60s, the 70s going on. What has been put in place across recent time within Newham and against what has been put in place nationally, because I know there have been in the past every child's a reader, every child's a speaker, all these kind of programs put in place by a particular party in the past, and may not have been highlighted in the last 12 or 13 years. But these are things that nationally and internationally we are very aware of. Second to that, we are also nationally and internationally aware of concerns about the school readiness of populations when they arrive, whether they're arriving in school at 3 or at rising 5. So what have we done about that? I work in Hackney. I'm not saying Newham is the only place where this happens. I'm a private school myself and but from the point of view of answering my residents, I need to be able to explain to them what we're doing that's different to meet a universal acknowledged need.
Thank you very much, Matt. Before you answer, thank you, Ellen, for letting us know that it's actually quite hard to hear the officers, and I think that we knew that that would be the case because of the way that the room is set up. If Vic, if you sort of pulled this slightly more towards yourself, and Ellen and Paul, do let us know. Yeah. So, yeah, we'd sort of, yeah, that's great. So those of us that are on this side, maybe just speak up a little bit more. Paul and Ellen, if you can't hear when they answer the question, then do let us know, that's fine. Who would like to answer Matt's question?
I'm going to start just by acknowledging the fact that you're quite right, Charles. These cohorts have been bottom of the league table nationally.
I'm really sorry. Actually, I just wanted to have a clarification before we go on, because we've just talked about these cohorts that are at the bottom. Are you specifically
Black Caribbean and black and white British?
So Black Caribbean and white British, and we're not talking about Gypsy Roma because the sample size is too small, presumably, for that.
They are of deep concern also, but no, we're not discussing them at present because we don't have the statistics to make value.
But that's not, yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that those were the two groups that we were looking at. So.
Sure. I was in fact going to read that because you're right, sample size is very, very small, but we know anecdotally that the level of low attainment in schools for these groups of people is by and large down to multiple literacies of deprivation, by and large down to
and cross-generational,
exactly,
psychological as well.
Of course. And this is information that we, as educational institutions, in my opinion, should have always known and always had, but probably only been properly speaking about and trying to tackle in the recent 2 or 3 decades. So it's very difficult when you're only looking at children's attainment as individualized rather than taking into account their family circumstances. And as is often reported in news, schools are doing more and more and more year on year to take into account the wider background of the child, their family circumstances, the additional support that's required. We as a local authority, through, for example, the E3, which is a very well-known scheme that we provide, are trying to address the poverty and deprivation that children experience within their families or their care network at home that will affect their attainment and their level of concentration or their attendance in school. So those are the things that the singular local authority are very well known that we do. Something that we've done very recently in partnership with the third sector and some of our schools is set up Education for Change, which was done directly in response by some of our school leaders after the murder of George Floyd in the US and the following Black Lives Matter movement, to specifically educate in our schools accessible literature and information on racism primarily faced by Black people in the borough and in the country and the world. Addressing, identifying and tackling racism is a key part of ensuring that these groups aren't unheard by their teachers, by their educational deliverers. So we are dealing with that in a more head-on way than we were, I would say, 5-10 years ago. As Patrick alluded to, however, doing a longitudinal study into the impacts of that, we're not there yet. But the bit of data that we don't want to speculate too hard on, which is, if you like, turnaround. So where a child is at attainment level in their early years, and then where they are in year 6 and where they are in year 11, we can anecdotally see that there is a leveling. There is a leveling by schools to identify the children and the families who need additional support that the local authority can chip in for, that I would say 10, 20 years ago wasn't happening. And the data is showing that that leveling is occurring in boroughs that have high attaining, high performing schools, where it wasn't decades ago. But you're right, the cohorts aren't changing, apart from the fact that people who are newer to Newham or who are newly are suffering from levels of deprivation outside of the school environment are beginning to form part of those low attaining group of children. And particularly are nationally part of that, but of course, we're not gleaning from our tiny sample size. But that's the answer also a little bit, Councillor Bowley's question as to why. We know why. We know it's due to poverty and deprivation. Tackling it is not solely a school issue, it's also a job for authorities, governments, other agencies. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
I think there was going to be, you were going to talk about some amelioration elements, weren't you? Is that because if you were, then this might be a time to particularly talk about that, and especially around any of the specific things that you're putting in place for the Black British children, particularly because I think there's about a 4-point difference between Black British and Black Caribbean. Sorry, White British and Black Caribbean, and then there's only another 4 points between them and the very top group. So it's obviously a stark difference between them. So if you could give us a bit of stuff around amelioration that you're looking at.
Yes, and I think one of the further pieces of what we did to put us into context what that performance looks like is to try and do some comparative work against national averages. It's actually quite hard to do because the DfE doesn't release data by the same disaggregated ethnic groups, or haven't done for 2022. It did do in broad ethnic groups in 2021. There's a slight caveat to that data, which is that it's based on teacher assessed growth from the pandemic. But it was interesting to see where Newham was in terms of its comparative performance, and it shows that as we'd expect, it's above average compared to typical neighbours in the London and by nationally. But it did show us by ethnicity an interesting point, which is that for attaining Black people's Newham score is above statistical neighbour averages. And it also showed that for white people's is below statistical neighbour averages. So we've definitely got more to look into, and I think that part of the work we're doing is proportionality can include some deep dives into maybe some of the reasons why this is occurring. In terms of, notwithstanding the point that's been raised, this is a long-standing issue with lots of complex practices. I also wanted to give some impact data on the education change initiative, which is part by us, and its growth in terms of work locally. The ambassador network for education change has 29 ambassadors from 25 different schools. So there are some initiatives which are growing in the borough in terms of how we're trying to address some of this disproportionality. But I think, I've been clear that what Joshua was clear that is focused on right disproportionality. So I think there's more we could do perhaps with right disproportionality in that attainment profile. I think in terms of our sort of broad improvement work across schools, I think part of our education vision that we're working on with partners across the borough, it does need to take account of this to see what we can do to drive improvement through partnerships. And the paper does give some detail on the existing initiatives and the subgroups that we already have inaugurated through the Education Partners Board, which has specific focuses to hold, not to hold settings to account, but actually to involve those partners in subgroups to share what they're doing and share best practice. And often, I think with complex issues like the ones we're talking about, it is as simple as sharing best practice which other schools can try and embed, and that is data evidence driven as possible. But that work can be ongoing. We can give further updates on any times that we're able to carry out on some of this disproportionality as we pursue this work with the Education Partners Board.
Thank you. I think, we'll come to. I think we would like to perhaps in the next municipal year to suggest that this could be an area of continued looking into. it's really good that overall we're doing so well, but we don't want any one group of people to be left behind, you know, and you know, whatever the group is, we have to ensure that we're kind of really honing in on that. So I'm pleased that we've done this piece of work and that we can see that there are groups that's happened to. This is only a question I've got as a slight geeky one, but I obviously didn't go and do any analysis on this because I didn't do that. What is kind of like the statistical significance between the groups and how large is, because I can look at that and go 41 point, well that's, you know, but actually in reality what does that mean? What does that sort of a level of difference, so there being 4 points between those two groups, what does that really mean? And is it statistically significant?
I think that's where it would be good to have the 2022 comparison available to us. We don't have that. We've got the 2021, and that would be given us a stronger position to be able to comment on significance. But I would defer to data and Hugh Jones, who's really strong in this kind of analysis, to be able to provide an update on the statistical significance of that kind of disproportionality.
Perhaps let's not waste his time for me just being curious. But thank you, Seta.
I would like to understand a bit more about, and maybe perhaps this could be for each day, but a bit more data about the pupil progress, because I think this is great at showing us what's happening at different stages. But what it doesn't show us is, for me, educational outcomes are not just about what children are achieving, but actually creating that love of learning, right? Like they love to be at school, they love to learn things. And for me, it's not just about what tests they passed at a certain point. It's about how they're progressing throughout their school journey and their educational journey.
Do you mean further than the progress 8 score that's down there as well? Because there's a progress score and an attainment score.
Yeah, so what I kind of mean is not just at those points in their life, and that's something that the Commission can look at, sort of in comparison to last year, that same cohort. Does that make sense? To see that there's progress between those times, if that makes sense. Sorry, I'm super ill and might not be making
that makes perfect sense, and I think it's additional evidence that we'd like, some longitudinal stuff.
Yes.
I think that's
quickly suggest what it might be.
Sorry, can I also just say, I've just had a message from my other half saying my 10-month-old has just bashed his face and he's all crying and exhausted, so I think I need to go.
Absolutely, thank you very much for being here.
Can I ask if the borough undertakes a certain survey which would answer that question?
Yes.
I can't remember what it's called. Is it the satisfaction survey?
Yes, I was thinking.
Or the well-being survey?
So do I understand the questions? And should I let you go?
Yeah, I think in brief, progress 8 is tracking school value added over a 5-year period from the start. So it is longitudinal by the nature of the way it's calculated from year 7 to that point. So the progress 8 following point 7 of the report probably is the one that tells us about the levels of progress that you're making over that 5-year point. So it's in itself, it's, you know, there's lots of questions in that, you know, educational services as to how useful that is and how accurate it is, but it is a helpful measure for comparison.
But it's linked to academic progress, not well-being progress, which I'm guessing is what they're talking about.
To be fair, this particular topic is to do with academic progress and attainment, so that's fine. But thank you. Is that an okay answer?
That's perfect.
Yeah. I hope that your baby is okay.
If I may, Chair, we'd be happy at a future meeting of the Commission to do a report of the well-being of children in schools. It's just that's not the data we came with today.
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you. Now, I think before I go back to that, I think there was a question over this side. Did you have a question?
I was, but it's slightly, because I tend to work way off to other scrutiny meetings, don't stick to what the questions are about, but in different parts, that makes sense. So if I can go with 8.13,
Yeah, feel free.
thank you. You was talking about safeguarding and your strengthening capacity. What does that actually mean? Yeah, and What's the team at the moment and what they were?
So we have very experienced, excellent education safeguarding leads who's been part-time, and we actually just, well, I mean, we made an offer to replace that officer. And we're looking into whether or not we can double that capacity for the second education safeguarding.
So what you're saying, if you've got more safeguarding in all schools as a term?
Well, safeguarding is the responsibility of each school and trust. We have a level of oversight and engagement when it comes to school improvement, and that's why we're looking to double that team. But that would already, that doubling would be a significant capacity increase. It's not the case that those two officers are responsible for safeguarding in the entire.
No,
it's not like children's services in that manner. But do you want to?
Yeah, so schools have really clear safeguarding responsibilities. All schools will have dedicated, designated safeguarding lead, and also a government is responsible. So there's very clear arrangements for what schools absolutely must do, and we know that that's.
So the safeguarding officer is an effect of making sure the schools are doing the correct thing in regards to.
We just work with designated safeguarding leads on sharing practice, sharing learning from national learning from areas that are related to schools, also keeping up to date with latest practices and policies. So we have a number of statutory functions and then functions above that to support schools, but it's about kind of system enabling, and occasionally can be where we receive a referral, the complaint to investigate that with the school working alongside. So it's a number of, it offers a number of functions for itself.
Thanks, you. I've only got I think we've only got time really for one more question on this. I think Matt, you've already asked one on this particular topic, haven't you? So Shanti, would you like to ask?
Yeah, it's about thank you, improving equity in Newham. Out of possible 100 Newham schools, 85 have allocated improvement advisor. How about 15 schools? Because we have 85 out of 100.
So what do the others have?
50.
What's happening to the others? Yes, okay.
So because of the mix of academies and maintaining schools, there's a slight difference in where school improvement sits. So for the academies, they will be supported by their trust, and their school improvement functions will be led by the policies within their trust around school improvement. So that makes up just over half of our schools in Europe. For the remaining 47, that's part of our function as a local authority in supporting our schools. So where we have our school improvement advisors working across other schools, it's part of our kind of offer to our maintained schools, but also thinking about the needs for academies as well. So it's a slight kind of different picture depending on which part of the school system.
Thank you very much. Just a question about the on your next steps 9.2, the education vision and engagement work is being undertaken with the benefit of this report analysis. Can I just ask, I mean, that sounds great because that sounds like our report has held that. What is that the case? Am I reading it correctly?
100%.
Fabulous. Well, then that's a very good thing. And I think that we can be quite proud that that has been the case. Do give us the gender stuff as well, and I think that we will certainly be wanting to go back and looking at that disproportionality and what sorts of things we're doing in order to help stop the differences, particularly along ethnicity.
If I may share, one of the ways we report that we delivered to relationship between Black boys and borough scrutiny, I believe it was last year. I went quite in depth on that topic because it might be worth the committee using that report to compare a year in advance. The difference that you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And so do you believe that the work that was done around that has improved the attainment outcomes for Black boys in the borough?
I wouldn't speculate at this point.
That wasn't meant to be like a gotcha question at all. I realised that it might have sounded like it wasn't at all. I was just thinking that because this obviously has a slightly different
Sure.
level than that. Yes, go on, Matt.
I've got one next steps question. Okay, so a bit nerdy. With the drop in school population coming into early years foundation stage, have you got any idea how that may be influencing changes in percentage of population type, ethnic types, which may then be leading to further work in the future, i.e. if if, for example, the numbers of white British are going up and Caribbean Black are going up or down, and how that will affect policies in the future.
I think that's really hard on those.
If you could answer relatively quickly.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a good question about demographic change. I think, you know, the demographic change of the cohort of children in won't change, you know, it will change over a long period of time and not drastically over individual academic years. So it would be how we, yeah, I suppose it would be how we continue to interact with that data as we put that in essentially the next.
I think the pupil roles of as a whole will have the impact as opposed to the change in demography. Yeah.
Sorry, just referring to the question, I asked a question. It may not be now or at the end, but actually.
I think we're going to have to send standing orders if you would like to answer.
Well, I was never just neglected that issue, maybe there was another, or maybe it's the connectivity, but the issue of like drop and roll.
We actually talked about to the committee 2 quarters ago.
Yeah, but actually, there's more information coming out, so we have been more informed for those issues.
We can do it again, but we're as informed now if we were to report the majority of the drop coming in and what that means.
Okay, all right.
So happy to do it again.
That's fine. No, if that's if you said there's no new information.
No, I'm just going to say that the data is also it would be the same data.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll give the next data to.
Yeah, as an update, when a year from the previous time that it was.
Based on birth rates.
Right. So that's the result of the new academic year.
I would like to, we don't need to extend yet, but we may well need to. So I think we'll bring that one to a close, and we've mentioned the key areas that we would like to take up there, and we would go on to the next agenda item, if that's okay. Thank you very much. I think if you'd like to leave us, then thank you very much. And we are going to go on to our last substantive item, which is the written statement of action progress report. And I would like to, I think the best way for us to do this, hopefully to make it go relatively quickly, is I'm going to suggest that we don't need a presentation on it, actually partly because this is a very helpfully and a good way of putting a report, and it does it in a really good layout for us to be able to follow. So what I'm going to suggest is that we actually do it by the improvement area instead, so we can ask questions based upon the improvement area, and then you can answer the questions. Is that okay?
Perfectly.
Fabulous. And again, I do want to say, Ellen and Paul, if you do want to dip in, then do just say it, because I recognise I'm not looking up that often, so you make sure you do that. So we've had this as a standing item, and thank you very much for giving us the brief updates. And then this is the sort of a bit of a 6-monthly larger update. The first improvement area that we had down was poor timeliness and quality of education, healthcare assessments and plans. Do we have any questions based on the information that they gave us in terms of that improvement area? We talked about this for a long time in our pre-meeting.
I think that's had a question.
Yes, I do.
Mads,
Sorry, I was going to put to more of a preamble, so I kind of drifted off slightly. Okay, you must tell me if it's the wrong question at the wrong time in the wrong place. One thing I wanted to ask quickly was, I could make assumptions, but what's been the highest area of increase in need in terms of the 4 SEN areas of need?
Yeah, so I think there's been a rise in requests for, so certainly working with our health partners, a request to be supported through the autism pathway. And we know that in we've got a slightly higher than national average number of children and people.
1 in 60, isn't it?
I've tried to check the exact
definitely.
figure, but it's, yeah, I'll have to. check
1 in
the figures
60.
later. But it is higher than national, so I think the three main areas of need would probably be a surprise to the committee would be autism, SEMH, and speech and language learning. So following similar to the national profile. I think in terms of the autism pathway, we know that through the pandemic there was quite a significant backlog, and that's been a waiting list of young people that are waiting to get through that pathway. That's been similar. So a number of national health services in other parts, mainly because professionals and practitioners couldn't people to make those assessments. So we have seen the pathway reduced from what was 84 weeks to 62, but we are now seeing another rise in requests for assessment through that pathway. So that is a piece of what we're doing with health at the moment.
And is that mostly being addressed at early years, or have you got a significant number of students that are still being assessed and diagnosed at pre-teen, post-teen?
So we see, I think our highest sort of referral is age 2 and 3, and that's a positive sign in terms of practitioners, schools, earlier settings, and professionals knowing when to refer in. We tend to see diagnosis rates around the 90% up to they're the right referrals. So predominantly in the areas that possibly the same figures in front of me for older teens and kind of older young people, but certainly we're seeing positive referral rates early, diagnosing early, using support plan early.
And is it possible to give us, not immediately, but at an appropriate time, the gender breakdown for each type, please? Because as we're aware, very often it can be up to 80% diagnosis is male, and a much smaller percentage is female. And whilst that's a reflection of national and international circumstances, I myself have little understanding of whether that's a true understanding of the balance of need.
Yeah, so I think we do see high level of boys in comparison to girls in terms of diagnosis. I might even have the figures if I want to come back to you in a minute.
But as we know, that's often because they're referred more often than girls. Can I
Sorry, could you just see if anyone else has any questions, unless it's a direct lead on from that question?
No, I haven't got a direct lead on.
Sorry, so 73% are boys and 23% girls.
That's fine, but I think we'll probably have time to come back to you anyway. I'd like to propose that we extend standing orders for 30 minutes in the hope that we won't use all 30 minutes. Do I have a seconder? Thank you.
You can't second. I think.
So can we vote on that then? Yeah. Okay, so there we go. So we have until 9:30. Thank you very much. Other questions on the EHCP timeliness and quality? On the report, yes, Simon?
Yeah, but I can't remember, can't see where it was in there. I was sort of trying to find the first good question. I know you were asking questionnaires to parents with regard to feedback, and I was wondering what type of, you were saying that it's very positive results and things of this nature. What I wanted to know was what sort of questions were going to ask? Are they reading the questions, for example? And I'm going to use a knife reference that I know Josh you will hate, but certain questions were asked during the LTN stuff, which they needed. Is that the same thing here?
And can I just ask as a
I was
clarity?
thinking what that got to ask.
Sorry, can I start with clarity? No, it's fine. Are you talking about stuff to do with the co-production or specifically on the EHCPs?
EHCPs.
Yes.
Okay.
I won't speak to the allegation about an area that doesn't sit within my portfolio, so I won't speak to it. However, could we get Councillor Rush an example of the questions that were asked to assuage his concern that they were indeed not of the Minister variety, and that they were indeed open questions of a family's true experience of the service. That is something that we'll take into account, but we can get you those questions if that's helpful.
Lovely, and then follow, you can send that round to the committee, then we can all see the answer. That's wonderful. Yes, Rachel.
I just wanted to comment under the EHCPs that I note that in January of this year, that 100% of the new plans were issued within 20 weeks, which is on time. Which, notwithstanding the other questions I know we've got, it's just a really huge improvement from where we were. So noted and with thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Whilst talking about the numbers that we got through, can I ask, in terms of the quality, because that's the other part of this, that it's about timeliness, but also about quality. How are we ensuring quality, and how often do EHCPs come back, and whether that started happening with any of those that we've managed to get the backlog through? Have any of them come back and say that they're not complete, or that they're not able to be used, or anything like that? And how are we ensuring quality from that perspective?
Did the committee receive an addendum on quality assurance?
I don't think we did.
Was it sent on Thursday? Yes.
I even know sent on this. Yes, quality assurance.
Has the committee had sight of it individually?
Yeah. Okay, in which case it must have, yeah, it would have done. It's not within the pack that I've got here, but yeah. Okay.
There was a note for us in that it details the process that we're currently going through. There was a level of quality assurance that we wanted to have by now that we don't. And we're working to get that for the next committee update. But frankly, had we gone forward with providing that detailed level, if you like, of qualitative data on the improvements of the service, it would have been premature. It wasn't ready yet. Therefore, we have brought the committee to provide that update with some detail as to why and to when we expect to have it. However, with regard to the numbers of EHCPs that have been returned, do we have information on that?
I'm not aware of any data around that. So in terms of its return, I suppose in terms of
or unable to be used because, so for example, if documents weren't attached but they were signed off because they needed to be signed off by a certain time, but then when they were unable to be used, so for those sorts of things where perhaps a rush might have meant that they weren't entirely complete.
So I'd have to take that away.
I have a sort of a supplementary question on that, and then Tim, you obviously have an answer that you'd like to give as well, which I'm sure will be great. Illuminating, not necessarily great. Do you believe, Josh, that it was appropriate to push through before we had the assurance of quality?
Yes, because statutorily we had to meet those deadlines. It wasn't a case that we weren't convinced that they wouldn't be of quality. I wouldn't say that we rushed to the point of sacrificing quality, but the level of improvement that we're looking to make as a borough, and in order to prove that we've made that improvement, that level of data gathering and internal quality assurance that we can rely on being checked externally, we're not ready for yet. I don't think that means that the ones that we push through in order to reach our targets were rushed, if you like. I don't think that should be interpreted in that manner. But I imagine that the HCPs that are completed 2 years from now, so to speak, at a rate of improvement that we're currently going on, will be both quicker and of more guaranteed quality.
But we were already told that the quality wasn't enough. So if we were already told that the ways that we did them, the quality wasn't high enough. Just to do them quicker and to get to, it seems as though we should have been looking at quality, ensuring quality before we did the backlog, because if the quality wasn't good enough, then why would those ones particularly have been good enough? Tim, it looks like you want to answer it.
If I may, that's okay, sure. So I chaired the fortnightly improvement focus meeting on the HCPs throughout last year. Without managing the backlog, the volume of the HCPs that each team member would have to work through would have, I think, worked against the idea of improving quality. So I think there was an absolute burning platform in terms of moving through those numbers of education health and care plans. Alongside the work on the numbers and timeliness, there was also some significant input both from the Department of Education, but also from our improvement partner, the Council. So there was training and support and the beginnings of quality assurance work going on, certainly in the autumn term last year. Now we are in a position where actually we're dealing with many much smaller numbers. There is really an opportunity to focus on quality. I know that's what the team are doing. It should be sort of recognised. There is the opportunity at an annual review to pick up on any issues of quality and to review the plan as a result. But equally, there is a drafting, process where families are provided a draft of feedback before the final plan is issued. Now, I'm not suggesting we're at a point where we are satisfied with quality, but just to give a bit of context to that.
It is helpful. I think it would be useful in sort of 6 months or so for there to be a bit of an idea around whether any, because it seems as though if we know the quality is poor, and then we're almost saying we're allowing this 700 people, or whatever the number is, to go through our acknowledged poor quality system.
I don't think any of us as a quality was poor, and I would contend that clearing the backlog was a key part of improving quality, because without doing so, the number of EHCPs that go on delayed and extended reduce the likelihood of them being of any quality when they're finalised, because those services are out of date. That's what can diagnose that young person. So clearing the backlog was a necessary part of that process that we had to do. We didn't frankly have the luxury of waiting for our health partners to get their services to where they need to be before we process the young people waiting for a diagnosis and waiting for a plan that their family, their school and a health service can implement. We had to get our young people through the service by the statutory deadline with their health partners at the level of quality improvement that they had reached in that moment. We couldn't just put them on board and say, well, that partner will be a bit better in a year and a half, so you can have nothing until then, just wait. We couldn't do that.
Just to be clear, improvement area for timeliness and quality. So it was, the quality was described as poor.
Yeah,
that was.
Yeah, and the timeliness is a bit that we have thus far fixed reliably. The quality is a bit we are still working on.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say there are times I feel kind of between my role and my professional role. I think the particular instance you're talking about, which was to do with what comes under one umbrella term of lack of quality, is a delay in professional reports being shared with the writers of the.
Can I just quickly ask Matt if this is a question for the executive?
Well, I can ask you a question for the executive. My concern when it comes to the EHCP process is actually at which point looking forensically, was the poor quality entering into the process? Because we're presuming that it's all down to do with the writing of the EHCP, which comes under your team. My concern is that our Senkos in schools being given enough support to enable them to make the first application for a full EHCP assessment using the correct terminology and the correct understanding of outcomes to meet chronic need. And is that one of the areas in which you have boosted the capacity of the staff within schools, as well as actually boosting the capacity of your own staff within your departments?
Thank you. So specifically, at what point is the lack of quality entering the system?
Yeah, I'm sure difficult has to start with more to answer, but I think that assessment of quality of the HCPs was in December 2021, and I think it's fair to say that that quality was an issue across the whole range of areas. So both in terms of the advice that's provided, but also in terms of the way the plan itself is constructed and the quality of production and the plan as well. So absolutely, as of December 21, there were quality concerns across a range of different elements and aspects. I think there's been lots of changes in this time, although we are acknowledging there's more work to do. There's been more guidance and training in terms of a range of professionals, including SENCOs who are contributing to that assessment. But also, more significantly, we brought in-house the plan writing. So before, a sort of historical arrangement was for many of those plans to be commissioned out, and we think that was a real barrier to improving quality. So now the team themselves are owning the production and the quality of those plans, and there's the greater ability to produce those with plans.
Yeah, I think there's a, I suppose, if I look as well forward in terms of, what are we put in place now? So the quality assurance framework is now in place, and we've just completed our first audit of 40 EHCPs, but at the same time, we're not, as we go forward, we're not thinking about just the document of the education health and care, that's just one particular asset, in the journey. I think it's also about feedback from families about their experience in the process, and how they are finding out at that point in time, feedback from schools, etc., feedback from the young person. So when we're talking about a quality assurance framework, we're looking at that multi-agency audit, and we'll be starting our first multi-agency audit in, I think, May, June. So in the next few weeks, it's starting, which will be a health, social care, and education QA, and that will be not just a one-off thing that we do at a point in time, but an ongoing engine room of, what is the lived experience of our young people, how they're experiencing that through the different lenses of the three core areas of EHCPs, and how we're using the thematic learning from that to improve practice overall. So it's something that we will start to look at particular thematic areas. So we may in future look at our post-16 cohort, our early years, perhaps even into the backlog as well. So it will hone in a particular course. But we've just finished our first 40, and there's already some learning which has been really helpful for us to think about how we work with SENCOs and with our own internal teams, and that will continue as a roadmap of thematic audit. So it's a key function for our service going forward.
Thank you. Mads, do you have any follow-ups on that?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. We go to Rachel. Did you just put your hand up? Yeah, Rachel on that side.
You just touched on a question that I was going to raise, which was about how we can capture feedback from children and young people and from parents and carers, but also how we could demonstrate how that feedback is changing over time. Because I think in amongst all the kind of quantitative kind of measures of numbers of EHCPs and statutory guidance and the amount of co-production being done, I felt like there's something also there that we might want to see about how people feel about the services that they're getting, and in particular seeing that after we've obviously put really quite a huge amount of resource and time into improvement, we would want to see the corollary to that being some sort of improvement in the feedback from parents and young people who feel that they're getting something which feels better and which they feel better about.
So I think there's two parts to it. I think one is the quality assurance piece that I've just described, and receiving that feedback and triangulating that and thinking about what does that tell us about our service in particular thematic areas. So that's really helpful when we're thinking about our training for our teams, the way that we can work more closely together, the way that we can support schools more in those spaces. So there's the QA lens. In the SEND strategy that's coming to Cabinet in June, on the back page will be essentially our outcomes framework, and that takes, I suppose, distills all of our key messages and priorities through the strategy as a series of I statements essentially, which will be able to thread through various surveys, particular engagement work that we're doing. So there's a multitude of ways that we'll get to know our systems better in terms of how things are improving, or where there are particular challenges and how we need to respond to that. And then likewise the experience of families on particular professional parts of our system. So it could be parts of health, could be parts of school. So there's not a singular way that we've captured, I suppose, how we'll measure impact through that outcome survey, which is in a sense actually coming to June.
And if that's something that you're working on at the moment, do you feel confident that that's going to be something by which you can show changing attitudes over the time of this improvement? Or will it really just be about capturing feedback towards the end of this work or as time goes on?
I think we'll be able to capture that improvement at the end of the process. If I'm being honest, I don't know if we imagine that we could get reliable updates in between that transition, but I don't think they'd be as helpful to us or even those mentally, unless you've got those updates after the new process has been implemented and completed.
Do we have baseline? I apologise if I just went out as in my mind as you were saying, but do we have baseline things to compare it to?
That's just, yeah, I mean, it's part of what we did with the second care improvement journey was we, alongside our quality assurance process, we were able to get views and experiences of children and families across that improvement journey. So the storyboards we created were, this was the problem and this is what families told us at the start of the journey. Now we're, 6 months, 9 months, a year in, 18 months plus. This is the feedback we're getting, and this is the data from QA that supports some of those. So I mean, it's not scientific, but I think in terms of quality, it gives you a real measure of what the experiences were and what they now are, and whether you've got sufficient sort of numbers of cases that have been looked at that gives you confidence that at the very least you're moving in the direction at best. The majority of cases are better quality and experiences are better.
Rachel, does that sound as though that would sort of serve the purpose that you're thinking?
It does. I suppose I'm keen to know that once we start implementing what we're doing, our parents and carers, children and young people, they then feel better about what's happening. And if they don't, maybe that's because of different expectations or different cohorts or experiences. There might be a kind of an answer to find that. And if they do, obviously that's a great news story.
And an area that this could link to is our desire to start measuring happiness, couldn't it? So to include happiness measures, which can show us whether our services are actually producing happier residents. So that would be good. It was Simon next, so please.
Thank you, Chair. Doing my usual 3.30, page 51. I know it says here the initial mapping of occupational therapy service has now been completed with recommendations. And you're going to develop an action plan. When's the night to be seen like that?
Sorry, could you?
3.30.
It's basically that we know that occupational therapy is a difficult industry to recruit into right now. Again, it's quite a short for graduates and qualified people.
Yeah, I think in terms of in terms of occupational therapy, we've seen the assessment wait time come down quite significantly from 25 weeks and then 15 treatment from 34 weeks to 26. So there has been quite a lot of improvement, but I think there are challenges in terms of pediatric therapeutic recruitment in both speech and language, occupational therapy and other parts. This is a particular focus for colleagues in health and part of their action planning. That comes through to what's called the SEND improvement, SEND strategic, it's very long name, SEND strategic improvement and outcomes for which I chair, which meets 3 weekly, and then every 8 weeks, the Senate executive meets, which my colleague Tim chairs as well. So the oversight of those action plans comes into those into that governance.
Joe, you looked at thank you. You mentioned, obviously, we're all aware there's difficulty getting finding new therapists coming in. Have you thought of different ways to try looking for recruitment? Have we thought about going into universities across around London where the students are coming to their 10 and their degrees, and why don't you come and look at us instead of having Gary or Hackney?
I think we do. I think also I won't try to connect Zoom again because it will probably fail. But on YouTube, there's a brilliant SEND recruitment video, which is on the.
There is a link.
I've seen the video.
It's very good. And you know, I think again we've had feedback from candidates who've applied for roles with us saying, you know, they felt that was very values based and very positive. I think one of the challenges though is not as many young people are choosing to take up those pediatric professions. So not only are there fewer out there are also fewer qualified. And I think that's a national challenge in speech and language EPs, educational psychologists, speech and language. So there is a particular, a bit like other professions, as we know.
So we'll have a question from Ken and then Mads, and then I think that we'll leave the EHCP improvement area because there are other areas as well for us to look at.
Yeah, sorry, I know we spent a fair amount of time, if I am going to go back to the clearing the backlog. I think Vic, you mentioned in terms of quality assurance work that you know reviews that you look at different things, and I think you said you might look at the backlog, how you dealt with that. I think probably for us, but more importantly for the residents of the project, actually making proactive say, we will look at that backlog to show people that we didn't rush to, because people might, when you hear clearing backlog, they might do that. Actually doing that, which will give confidence, not only them, but also parents with children who they think might have any in the future of the quality of service they're going to get with new residents. It would just be a suggestion that I think actually prioritising that, it's up to you and all the different priorities, but in terms of public perception and public relations, I think that would be very valuable.
And I think it's a good point, Ken. Once you've got your kind of quality assurance framework in place, almost doing like a dip study on the ones that went through in that part might be a way of proving that it was up to the quality standard that we have now set and have decided is appropriate.
So I possibly answer that in terms of I've been having conversations with the Parent Care Forum, and it's a particular area of focus for them. So we are scheduling it essentially, and it will be one of our first audits. I'm going to take when that is because we're testing our new framework in the May and June multi-agency auditing. But it will be one of our first areas as a thematic.
Lovely, thank you very much. Thanks.
I was very pleased to hear about your, I can't remember what you were calling it, your multi-agency professional meeting, your team around the HCP process, whatever it's, I can't remember what it's called, your professional network between the departments. What's it called?
I have to remember it. The SEND strategic improvement and outcomes.
That's it. That's it. It was on the tip of my tongue. I think what would be really interesting to all of us is to understand, and you know, Tim's in the room as well, Shane, Sarah's not here. But for many people, the C in EHCP is often silent, and nobody's quite sure what it's meant to provide, and therefore nobody asks for it. So it's going to be really interesting if the meetings that you have can help inform not only within Newham to professionals, but also to parents, so they have a greater understanding of what could be on offer to them, what should be on offer to them from the silency and the
for those that may be watching on YouTube, the C being care.
Yes, sorry, the C, education, health and care plan. Education provide 80% of what goes into an EHCP provision. Health will sometimes through the schools will provide the speech and language therapy support and advice, and the occupational therapy support and advice, and the diagnosis of the ASD, ADHD, etc. But when it comes to the C of education, health and care plan, many people are unaware. I don't know what Paul feels about this within school as well, that the care element of the education, health and care plan is often, as I said, the silent C in EHCP.
In terms of a question on that, is that something that you guys have sort of felt is the case, and how would you ensure that that element isn't being lost?
Yeah, so absolutely recognise that. I think you're absolutely right. It's not necessarily the element that gets the most attention when thinking about EHCPs. And we've recognised the importance of improving the consistency and quality of advice from second-hand knowledge into EHCPs. But more broadly speaking, and I'm sure everyone wants to talk about this, our new centre inclusion strategy really focuses in on the early help and support that's available for families. So, you know, with the right early support, one of the majority of families where the children with SEND won't need sort of statutory social care, but a real focus on prevention and what support can be offered either through social care or through the voluntary sector or other early health services and really time. That's a real focus.
For you, is that particularly for students who have chronic social, emotional, mental health, or are you also talking about families where the main concern is to do with autism or with speech and language issues?
Well, I think it's broad to me. So, you know, any child from any of those categories could have a social care need. And of course, you know, many families, whatever the particular category of need that someone has, never get from them to feel. So we very much more actively needs led, and also really understand what service, what support will add value and be what benefit to that child or that family. But sorry, Becky, I don't want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other point is in our governance, you know, it's representative of all partners. So, as we said, semi-executive, semi-improvement board, you know, care, health, key partners are represented there, and then also in parts of our panel in terms of making decisions about support and provision for children. So it's not silent in terms of governance, you know, in that respect, and our auditing policy assurance process is multi-agency as well. It's, you know, certainly joint care and education and health in that. So we've tried to integrate as much of our thinking, so it's representative of the whole experience of the child and the family, not just the individual piece. But you know, acknowledge as well there are some sort of challenges in the way that care support is translated into an EHCP, and that can be an area that we pick up with quality assurance as well.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of work to be done in that area.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to the next improvement area, which was underdeveloped co-production. Do we have any questions on underdeveloped co-production from the report? Feel free. Yeah.
To fulfil that criteria, what have you put in place in terms of training for parents, ensuring that parents have a full understanding of their ability to input before the production and during the production of the draft EHCP, rather than just you've got 2 weeks to reply to the draft?
So there's one area there that's the question is specifically around EHCP, although this is actually a broader thing in terms of co-production across the services. But I think that the question is still very pertinent. about what input do we put into parents in order to allow them to fully engage with the co-production element?
I think the improvement in the standardised service is a key part of that, because that can increase access for families. We do produce a regular report on that, the health and wellbeing boards to its level of improvement of family access. We've also had commissioners work directly with new parents or others, so these are the report to ensure that the families understand the role that they have every right to play in the co-production of their child care plan. And I would say that there is a fair few points of work detailed here. I mean, there's any more that you want to highlight specifically?
I think we from the day host organisation as well to support the parent forum. I think recognising that you know, in terms of their capacity as volunteers to engage in something like that we're doing, also to engage, you know, the work they do to engage with families through their work, the host organisation, which will go live very soon, will be helping them build some capacity to do further engagement. Lots of engagement with families through the SEND strategy, and you know, I think that's been so it's been over 250 stakeholders involved in that, but not just you know, singular events multiple times through the process as well. So the impact of that has been kind of, you know, somewhat kind of exponential in terms of the amount of engagement and communication that's been. And I think there are other examples of co-production framework where I suppose our commitment in terms of get the name of it in the document, but it's our kind of charter for how we will work with and play with families as well. So you know, I think it's in all layers. I think there are specific points in the journey where certainly through the development of section A, which is about expressing their views, or a young person potentially expressing their views and what they want to achieve from the plan, where we are thinking about our practice and how we can have co-production meetings early on as we start to get advice come back and develop outcomes together. That's not in place at the moment, but it's certainly on the trajectory. And obviously we're going through our SEND redesign, which is referenced here. A number of roles being recruited to recruit videos working. We're seeing some really positive engagement from you know, people interested in applying for those roles. But as we kind of get the service up to full capacity in a permanent cohort, you know, those co-production meetings will be really key early on. We'll probably institute those as part of our practice. So some distance travel, I think more to do, but you know, I think we know where we want to get to in that space.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on this area? On point 3.44, it talks about some feedback forms. I was just wondering what percentage of parents completed the feedback forms?
It was a relatively small return rate, which so we didn't want to draw too many conclusions from it. I think it was below 50. So we've got more work to do with the parent forum and with partners in terms of increasing the return rate, but it did give some early indications in terms of response. So I'm not going to suggest it's indicative of all families. It was relatively small, but it was our first bit of feedback, I think, in that space.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's just recognition of the need to seek other means to get the feedback from families. So you know, to relay process.
Thank you. And just under this item, I would quite like to suggest that we could maybe visit some of the parent groups that you set up. When we're looking at, not in the near future necessarily, perhaps in 6 or 12 months' time, or we could suggest it to the next municipal year's commission as a possible good idea.
Or yeah, if you like, that's the formal.
Yeah, thank you very much. The next one was transition of post 16. Are there any questions on the report on transition of post 16? Yes, Matt.
I wanted to know if he's planning to improve the transition, particularly with the distributed investigate dates.
Who would like to answer that question?
So was that how we're planning or are we planning?
How?
I thought I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I suppose sort of part of this, system, as part of the work that was described earlier around the apprenticeship board. I think we know there are challenges in terms of that transition, both in terms of education, as young people need education, but also talking about the care transition for our social care. So it's a significant area, I think, for us as part of the improvement journey. I think it's also an area that many local authorities nationally have found particularly challenging because of that complexity. So I think, in terms of the report, it details out a number of areas that are part of that improvement plan. It remains kind of under the oversight of both the governance groups that I've described and also the transitions board as well.
Does that include the post 16?
Yes, that is essentially thinking about positions one year on into that.
Yeah, it's not just your post 20.
No,
There's been, sorry, significant focus on direct development, hasn't there, in terms of some of the work with FE providers, but also some capital bits that we encouraged from those providers to improve provision there. So yeah, there's quite a lot of space, recognition of sort of the challenges.
And what,
Sorry, I think, is this continuing the same question?
yeah, I was
We've
gonna
only
ask.
got 11 minutes and I just
Okay,
want to make sure that we finish off.
I'll leave it at that.
Lovely, thank you. If you've got any questions though that are burning, then do send them to Paula and she can pass them on. Any questions around the local offer? No. Around improvement area of speech and language therapy and occupational therapy waiting times? Yes, Simon.
Thank you. The question there. Yeah, you said they're getting referred within referrals within 22 weeks and then process. What's the waiting time between when the process waiting till they've actually been seeing somebody? I think is what I mean.
So that, what's the current average waiting?
Yes, yeah. After the referral has been done, what's the waiting time? You're saying it's within 22 weeks. What's the sort of average? Is it 20 or is it 15? Maybe 23.
So the 22 to 3 weeks is the assessment, I think that's stated in the report. Apologies, I didn't get the health.
Yeah, it's 3.59 that helps.
Yeah, perhaps we haven't referred to I suppose provision in terms of treatment, but certainly something we can right to have honest to provide that information.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions on this area? I had a question around the recruitment that you lay out here and just whether it was in line with expectations in terms of the level of recruitment. Are you kind of on track or are you a little behind? Because I know in certain other areas you said that you're a little behind, but is this on track?
So I can just put in again, I'm sure it might want to add. So this recruitment work was sort of under sort of way in a significant way last year, when as I said, I was chairing that formal group. And it's helped to who are recruiting for those speech language therapists.
Yeah.
It's a very, very challenging field. And actually I think they were quite surprised at the success that they've had recruiting those roles. Clearly there's still some gaps there and some vacancies, so I think I'll have pulled out all the stops to make those roles quite interesting. I think it's a very competitive field and they continue to do that work, and we will continue to ask the right dates for those groups. So I think it probably, to some extent, it exceeds expectations in terms of what they achieved last year, but very, very aware there is no real vacancy, and we need to continue to understand what the position is and what further work they're doing. But some of the joint commission work we're doing on speech language therapy is again about changing the model of delivery. That's the proposal we're working towards, and also sort of linking speech and language therapy much more into a sort of enhanced way of working. And I think that again could add sort of interest and value to those roles, and one that would again support health in recruitment.
Thank you very much. And that takes us to the end of the specific areas. You do have a risk, sort of a risk assessment and conclusion. I would slightly suggest that the person writing it, who I'm sure is a very competent person, might have run out of steam slightly at this point, because the risk assessment only has 2 items and then a various actions. And if there was to be a risk assessment, which I think is a very good idea, so actually thank you for it being in there, because I think it's a very good idea for there to be a risk assessment based on the WOSA, but I would have expected it to have been item by item rather than.
My sense is this is a kind of summary, not right? There is much more detail of risk assessment. Yeah.
Sure that.
So if you'd like to keep a very detailed risk assessment, we can share it, but we wanted to ensure that the committee is reading the work with us as summary as light as possible, because these are the key ones and the ones that.
These are the ones that you think, so on your larger risk assessment, would these be the ones that might be read or that might be more time? So I can't tell why these ones are here as opposed to any other particular ones.
I would label them as the equivalent of a standing risk item. They are a permanent risk.
Yeah.
And they are the 2 risks that would lead us to not meet what we promised in the WOSA. Everything else are areas that we can mitigate, and that they shift and they change, and it's very detailed and very bitty, whilst this is the stuff that if the risk was to take place and go wrong, the committee would want full knowledge in advance that it could go wrong.
Lovely. So if in the document I have something saying that this is saying the risks, it might just be useful to know, to have a tiny summary to say this is obviously not all of the risks. These are the ones that we consider to be the standing lifestyle or something like that would be lovely. And just to say that the conclusion seems to only be about co-production rather than a conclusion on all of the areas. Oh, it says consultation. That's right. Oh, no, that's so much better. I haven't even had it hit to the head like Joshua has. So I have no, but also thank you in the pre-meeting for no one pointing that out. That refers to the end of that particular item. We are wanting to look particularly at the quality of the EHCPs, and thank you for suggesting that in, say, a year post them being done, that there could be a little bit of a dip into them to check that they are up against the quality assurance framework that you will have in place by that point. Also looking at how the interventions that are being put in place are actually affecting happiness and satisfaction, I think was another key thing that sort of came out of this discussion, and also meeting the parents groups if that is appropriate. Then the specific one that you mentioned, that we would also like to do that. In which case I move that. Do I move it? Yes, I do. That we note these key outcomes from that report, and thank you very much for the time and effort that went into it. It was really very comprehensive and appreciated that. In which case we'll move on to the very last item, which is the date of the next meeting, which I cannot tell you because this is the last meeting of this municipal year. So I would like to thank everyone for their input this year, and let's see what happens next year. Thank you. Thank you.